Hello, it's Deborah Krasniewski here from Adai. I'm working with the Crown Heights Community Council, and we're very grateful and blessed that we have gotten this grant from the City of New York given to us through the council member Matthew Eugene of Crown Heights. And to that end, we have a workshop and conference called about shalom bayis, marriage, and domestic abuse. This week is Shalom Bayis Week, which we'll be spending many of our evenings talking about different aspects of Shalom Bayis, so we don't get to the point of abuse. Tonight we're very grateful to have Rabbi Mendel Lipskier from Sherman Oaks. He'll be talking specifically to young men newly married, and anyone else who is listening. This talk is specifically geared to the young newly married men. So thank you, Rabbi Lipskier.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mendel Lipskier from Sherman Oaks. I am honored to be giving us a presentation specifically geared to, as it says here, newlywed men, newly married men. So many men consider themselves newly married even many years later, but it says the first years of marriage, so specifically that. I'm not sure who the crowd I'm talking to is, if it's only married men, as it was advertised, or I guess because it's a publicized number, so there may be many more people online, maybe unmarried men, to be married, maybe women, etc. So the talk is going to be specifically geared to married men. So you might hear things that you're not used to if you're not a married man, and maybe things that don't apply to you, or maybe things you don't want to hear, you shouldn't be hearing. So this is at your own risk. I will try to be as sensitive as possible to the larger crowd. Shine, I'll tell you this. This is what it is. I will talk for a few minutes, and then there was some questions came in before, and then I'm sure there are more questions that are coming in or came in. So the issue here we're going to talk about specifically is one concept, Shalom Bayis. And Shalom Bayis is a very broad concept. It's a word that not everyone loves to hear. Shalom Bayis, it comes out of our ears already. But the truth is that it is the word. It is the word that comes from a pasuk, and it is something that the Rebbe constantly quotes as being midoiraisa, as being something biblical. Most probably based on v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha and other things as well. So Shalom Bayis is key, and the question is, we all want it, we all need it, and how does one have it? And the answer is we don't have it, we need to make it. We need to do it. It's not a noun, it's a verb. You have to do Shalom Bayis. You can't just have it. It needs to be an investment. It needs to be a daily investment. So most people get married and things start off well, in most cases. And people say, okay, so we're all prepared and we're geared up and we had our classes and Shalom Bayis and I heard the lectures and my marriage is going to be the perfect marriage and it's going to be so wonderful and it's going to be great. And then we get married, and when all the noise is over, Sheva Brachas or so, and we're back to our daily life, and then you have to do Shalom Bayis. And then people turn around and say, oh, my, I didn't think it would be so difficult, or I didn't think it would be this much demanding, or I thought it would be much easier, or why is it so difficult? I didn't realize adjustment is so hard. Am I doing something wrong? Is she doing something wrong? Am I just in a bad mood? Is she in a bad mood? Is it that time of the month? What's going on? So yes, sometimes when we prepare, we have to be realistic and understand that we prepare and we know, but once you get into it and you start living together in a home, everything becomes more challenging because it's not simple and it's not something we're used to and it's always something new. So what is the key? to unlock the difficulties or the challenges or maybe the adjustment that has to happen between husband and wife. We are different, come from different backgrounds in most cases, years, 20 years of different backgrounds. You can't just blend and fuse and become one in a split second. It takes a lot of hard work and consideration and commitment and respect and love, v'chulu v'chulu. There's a beautiful letter from the Rebbe, and this is a great suggestion on Shalom Bayis, that besides generally, the Rebbe gave an instruction to husbands and wives to learn together, whatever it is. Of course, the laws of Harchakas have to be studied together after marriage to make sure that we're on the same page, and other halachas if you want to make sure you're understanding each other, whatever each one learned. And the Rebbe also suggests other Limud HaTorah. The Rebbe writes especially in the time when you cannot be together physically. So Limud HaTorah is something which bonds us as one. Even when we can't have the physical connection, we can have the spiritual connection through Torah, which is one with Hashem. So that's a general Hayra'ah. And in general, it's a great suggestion to actually learn the subject of Shalom Bayis. Whether you want to learn it beautifully in the Rebbe's letters or Sichos, and there's great Maftechos. There's a few books, in Eternal Joy, Volume 3 has some things. There's a book in Hebrew called Oyer Habayis. I think a few editions have been published already. Letters of the Rebbe in the subject of Shalom Bayis. In English, there's a book called A Peaceful Home. Letters of Lubavitcher Rebbe and Shalom Bayis. And things like that, which in addition to learning the Rebbe's perspective, you get a good starting point for conversation. Because many of us, when we get married, we learn that it's not so easy as we imagined to have conversation about relationship. Because it's not just about conversation when we're dating and it's beautiful and fun and you can chit-chat and talk whatever you want. When you're dealing with conversation of relationship, in relationship there has to be emotional expression and talking and bringing out our emotions, and that becomes much more difficult, especially when we're not used to it. And when you have a background of, in addition to learning the Rebbe's Torah, so it's beautiful that you have subjects to talk about, and which can bring greater understanding of each other. So in one of the letters, the Rebbe, I think, points out on the husband's responsibility that a home, to have Shalom Bayis, the main 4 ingredients is, I'm not saying them in order, is kavod, simcha, ahava, and shalom. I don't remember the order or if there was a particular order, but it's in English we would say respect and happiness, joy, and love and peace. And that is the responsibility of us young men to try. It's a good on the man to try to take that, his responsibility. Of course, the woman should also, and she can do her part. But as responsible to always keep that mood. And it's very doable to have a peaceful mood, and a respectful mood, a loving mood, and a happy mood. And part of being masculine and being a man is that you are supposed to be much more in control of your moods, or completely control, and always be able to make the mood. As the Rebbe demands, be besimcha, and that you can do. Be loving, that you can do. Be happy, be peaceful, and be respectful, which is a point to bring out, especially in the beginning of marriage and forever, that respect in a relationship, kavod, is much more important than love, than ahava. Everyone says, relationship, it's loving my best friend. The truth is respect is a lot more important and a lot more basic, and that's why in the Rambam, I believe in Nesikliya Shulchan Aruch, when it brings down this quote from the Gemara about loving your spouse, your wife, it says, first, you should respect her more than yourself and love her as you love yourself. And respect means clearly comes first, and clearly is more demanded than love. It means you have to respect her more than you respect yourself. And that's a very important factor, because respect means many things. Number one, it's in Chassidus Ahava V'yira, respect is giving somebody their space, not crossing lines, not stepping over the boundary, not going into their privacy. This is what respect is. Love is where you join the other person, is where you bond. Respect is where you create boundaries and you respect the boundary. And that's, so to speak, people say, oh, that's like, difficult, and that's where I thought we're supposed to be married and we share everything, and of course the answer is no. Respect is very important, and people need their private space, whether physically, emotionally, etc., and you have to know when you don't cross the line. So that's just a Maimer HaMusgar about respect. Another item that comes up all the time is men make a mistake of being masculine means being strong and being assertive and being responsible. That's all true. And for a woman to expect that from a man, that's a very that's beautiful, and especially what it says in the Ksuba. And all men, if you got married and you didn't read the Ksuba, or you didn't understand everything it says, I suggest you take it out and reread it and see everything you made a kinyan on. What means va'ana eflach va'eker ve'ezen va'farnes v'sichelichi ki'ilchas guven yudayin, etc., etc., zanen va'farnes and l'shem b'kushta. All the beautiful words it says in the Ksuba about responsibility. And that is a tremendous amount of responsibility, and it talks about respect there, more than love. But a great ingredient of being a successful husband is humility. And when we're out in the world, or we're doing shluchas or business or whatever else we're doing, it's a very strong trait when a person has pride and ego and macho and going out there and doing tremendous stuff and achieving and accomplishing. It's wonderful. But when you come home, the bigger ingredient that has to take over is humility. Humility is to be able to tone down, soft, key in, and connect in a relationship. Now, in the Frum world, sometimes in the Hasidic world, we're talking here in the Chabad world specifically, sometimes we grow up because of our yeshiva system and the way the conditions and what the demands are and how difficult it is to be a Chassid in the world. We don't necessarily in our teenage and early adult years develop real relationships. Some people are very lucky and we have strong relationships with our parents or siblings or one or two. Usually there's no more than that, of our teachers or mashpiyim or mentors, or sometimes very few close friends. And most people in this world in general, and by us it's no different, suffer from a tremendous amount of internal loneliness. And it's a problem. And we need to realize that getting married, it could be a bigger problem, because worse than being lonely is to be around someone that makes you feel lonely. So if us husbands are married to a woman and they start feeling lonely, that we don't get them and we don't connect to them and we don't respect them or not in tune, or we mainly don't understand them even, that becomes a tremendous area of suffering by women, and we have to learn how to break out of that and learn what a real relationship is. And it takes a lot of time, and we need to learn, and that's part of being humble. A key ingredient of being humble and growing in relationship in Shalom Bayis is, I'll use the word feedback. How do we grow from children? As the Torah says, we are born very selfish and very wild, and we grow up to be more mature and less selfish and more selfless and sharing and giving room for others, and less chutzpahdik or whatever else we try to do as children. We do that because we get feedback from our parents and adults and siblings and teachers and classmates. Hey, don't do that. Hey, that's rude. Oh, you're shlamazel. You're dirty. Look at this, what you did. Clean up. This is the way you do it. And we're shown how to do things and how not to do things, and we keep on hearing from the people all around us, and that's how we grow. And somehow, in the emotional world, we don't necessarily do that. And as we grow up, as teenagers, we become the understanding that we're the best and we're the biggest and we know everything, and we stop asking. People around us stop giving us feedback because they're afraid of the rebound or the reactions, and we are not humble or taught enough to ask for feedback. And therefore, at some point, we don't grow in this area of understanding people, treating people properly with respect, and we can be very, in a sense, even bullies without even realizing what we're doing, chas v'shalom, to the level of abuse, because we don't have that feedback. Very few teachers will go into the classroom after the class and ask a few students or the whole students, how was the class? Did you understand what I was saying? Was I clear? Was my tone of voice okay? Was I talking too fast? Was I talking too slow? Did you understand? Was I connecting with you? You know, some teachers are masters and know it, but most don't even ask these questions. And how is the connection supposed to grow, and how are you supposed to grow? In business world, out there in the companies, everybody builds on surveys, customer surveys, technical surveys. Everything is feedback. How can we become better and better and better? When it comes to a marriage and a relationship that's so strong as a marriage, feedback is always beautiful. And we need to become humble to ask for it. How is it going? When we talk, how is our tone of voice? We know this from everywhere, that what we say is very small of the message, very small percentage. It's the tone of voice, facial expressions, body language. What message are we sending to the other person is mainly through our eyes, face, body language, and tone of voice. The words are a very small percentage of the message that's getting across to the other person. So there's nothing wrong once a month for women and husbands to get together once in 2 weeks and sit and discuss the status of how the Shalom Bayis is doing. And in general, even more often, it's a good habit. You know, how was I today? Am I talking nice? Am I connecting with you? Do you think I'm understanding you? Am I talking with respect? And even when it comes to physical things, this is another issue which also needs feedback, because somehow, fortunately, but also unfortunately, in the frum world, Hasidic, especially Chabad and other Hasidic worlds, we are not necessarily taught the proper physical touch to our wives, to women. And how are we supposed to know that? We don't see our parents doing it, which is for good reasons of respect and different halachic and Hasidic reasons. Also not to be able to feel weird when the difference of the Nida days and the Tahara days, but we're still not taught. It's unfortunate, because people should be taught when we're growing up and preparing for marriage what a proper touch is, what a kiss is, what a hug is, and because of that, many people don't know and cannot be doing it properly, and it can be perceived not proper or aggressive or worse than aggressive. And it's not something somebody can learn automatically, and you can't learn it from society. Because from the end of the early 50s, most probably, when the heavy romance and then the promiscuity of the 60s, and as the 70s, 80s, and things became vulgar and wild and violent, and the garbage we have today all over the place, and the billboards on the street, online, etc., this is not where we can get our information from, because information from the world is not normal, to say the least, awkward, creepy, etc., etc. So it's good to get feedback as husbands from our wives. How are we doing? Is it okay? And there's nothing wrong. It's difficult to start talking about these things, but when we ask for feedback, we'll get it. When you ask humbly, you'll get it. Because if you're a man, you're strong and you can take it. You don't get offended. You don't take things so personally. You don't get all zakratzt and bent out of shape because she said it this way, or she looked at me that way, or she snapped this way. This is okay. And that's part of being strong. Back to the masculinity. Being humble is very difficult, and it needs a lot of power. Restraint, kayach hagvura, to restrain and hold back and be humble, is much harder than to be sharing and giving and outgoing and loving. And that's a quality that is very much needed. And it's badakumenusel. The more feedback you ask, the more communication you'll have, the more you will learn, and the more we will grow. And it has to be openness. At home, honesty is what counts. If husband and wife cannot share with each other honestly what they're feeling and what they're going through, of course with respect, always with respect, then it's a shame. It's not where it needs to be. It needs to grow to such a place. And that's how it is. The Eibusha designed the men one way, and the Eibusha designed the women the other way. And most men, when we get married, we say, oy vey, why? I didn't know. Why did Hashem make them this way and that way? That's how Hashem made them. That's your challenge. It's a new part of life. Just like the neshama, when it comes down to the guf, has so much to learn about eating, sleeping, and business, and all other physical things that neshama didn't know about up there to be able to function down here. And then it does mitzvahs. So too, when you get married, you have a lot of new things to learn about responsibility, treating another person, relating to another person, etc., etc. That's part of what the Eibishter wants, and that's part of bringing Dira B'Tachtainim. As it says in one of the letters, I think it's from the Frierdiker Rebbe, maybe from the Rebbe, I don't remember right now, that people think that Shalom Bayis is a means to an end. It's like Emtsai L'Matara, as he says. It's not. It's an end in itself, because a peaceful home is not just a means to an end, to be a good Jew, to make a Dir B'Tachtainim, to bring up a family, to be Mekayim, Pru, or Vu. Shalom Bayis, he says, is your miniature Dir B'Tachtainim. The Tachlis of the whole world is Dir B'Tachtainim, like a dwelling place for Hashem, and having peace at your home and loving home is your Dir B'Tachtainim, because your wife is the Shechina, etc., and bringing down the Eibishter into your home is your miniature Dir B'Tachtainim. Some areas where it's good to learn, ask feedback, reach out. If you can't figure it out yourself, reach out. There are plenty of people. Yes, if we do a survey, Shalom Bayis can be not score so high on the list. It's unfortunate because people don't invest, and Shalom Bayis should be much higher, should be much better. There's a lot of room to grow. But because people don't want to reach out, you reach out. Feil Harav, a mashpi'ah with a hey for a woman, and etc., etc. And there's nothing wrong with always learning more. And we need to grow. In the cultures before us, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, people got married for many technical reasons. Today people want love and relationship, and it's harder. And back then, as I always say, people's roles, husbands' roles, wives' roles, fathers, mothers were very defined, and people were busy doing their thing. And husband and wife spent time together. They were seeing each other maybe 2 hours a day. So to be at your best behavior 2 hours a day is doable. Today's day and age, we're in each other's face all day, all night, with the texting and the emails and the phone calls, and everybody does everything. He shops, she shops, and everybody washes dishes or whatever else you do. So now we're demanded to be at our best behavior 15 hours a day, and that is very difficult. But we need to learn and do it, yes? So in a certain way, what used to be 50 years ago, people coexisted and lived together and got along, was enough to keep a marriage together for the responsibility of children, etc. Today, people are demanding much more, and women expect much more, and the generation is weaker, and very few women can handle a house all on their own and bathe their 9 kids every single night and never have a cleaning lady, etc., etc. And that's perfectly fine. That's the reality of our generation, and that's up to the husbands to deal with it and learn how to have better communication, talking, better effective communication, and have a greater Shalom Bayis. Now I'll just go through a few details before I go to the questions. We are going to disagree. We are going to have differences of opinion, and there is sometimes conflict. And usually a good shadchan or a friend should tell the couple that you need to talk about this when you're dating. How are we going to resolve our differences when we get married? We're going to have differences. What's going to be the formula? If you didn't figure it out before, then it's late in the game, but you need to figure it out how this is going to be. Because when there's no formula and unfortunately, the family can, the relationship can start becoming a little like a business, then it's over. I forgot who I read this from. Ish Chacham wrote, the second marriage becomes a business. I did this, you do that. I did it for you, now you do it for me. I did yesterday's dishes, you do today's dishes, you're done. The relationship is over. It's not a marriage. Now it's a business. You can't do that when it comes to money, when it comes to doing this and doing that. It has to be a flow. It has to be natural. It has to come from a good place and from a place of oneness. Yes, there are difficulties. Yes, we have problems with budgets. But, I'll have my bank account and you'll have your bank account and I'll give you $300 a week or a month to spend and you're going to have this much and that much. It becomes like a business. It ruins the whole natural flow. There has to be respect and understanding. You spend too much, I spend too little. Okay, these are, first of all, differences you should have known already when you dated. And if it's not, if you didn't know it then, you know it now. You reach out to someone to help if you can't help yourself. And just know something, never let any problems linger. A problem should not last. If a problem lasts 3 months and it's not being resolved, reach out for help. Any type of problem. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, have a chazaka. If you're not able to resolve it, reach out for help. Any issue, from the bedroom, from financial, from the kitchen, whatever it is, chinuch, don't let it go like that. Another issue in newly marriage is when it comes time, Baruch Hashem, for pregnancy. Now, when a woman is pregnant, everything changes. The hormones changes, the feelings change, everything changes. Libido changes, if you know what that is. And you have to be much more sensitive to her needs. Number one, she'll be very, very tired all the time. Sometimes the morning sickness. This has to be taken with tremendous consideration, respect, and gentleness, and it requires, yes, some of us, we lose our patience, and we need iron nerves, and that's the way to do it. And when you show that you're an extra mensch, then she'll be an extra mensch to you. Then when it comes time to having the baby, that becomes a difficult time for men on many levels. Number one, the distance between husband and wife lasts for weeks and weeks and weeks. Number two, you need to know that, yes, that's how the Eibishter created it, that emotionally a woman also is kind of disconnected from her husband in a certain way after birth because she is bonding with the baby. And bonding with the baby, you feel like you're just a guest in the house. And I'm just like a masharis, I'm like an attendant here. Am I part of the picture here, or who do I belong here? Some men start getting the feeling that they're in the wrong place, and that's just how it is. Take your time. This is how the Eibishter made it, and with time, bond more with the baby, show tremendous sensitivity, be more of a mensch, be more providing, be more giving, and of course, women after that will recreate and reconnect, and everything will be the way it should be. Many people have this chus and the blessing from the Eibishter that you can move into one of the parents' homes after having a baby. And that is, on one hand, a great thing, because speak to any doctor who knows, and generally holistic health people, that women need to rest after having a baby. And if they can rest for exactly a month, even less is good too, but a month is the best, of not doing anything, especially with the first week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of doing nothing besides taking care of the baby, no food and no laundry and no washing and no taking care of anything, just taking care of themselves and the baby with help. It's a special, special blessing, and they can get their strength back. And every day that a woman does not have that rest for a month, that's the general knowledge out there by the Nashim Skenas, the Elder Babas, and the holistic people. If a woman can only rest for 29 days instead of 30, then that day that she lost rest will take a whole extra month to get that strength back. And if she has 1 day less even, then it's another month. And so if a woman didn't rest for 2 weeks, it'll take 14 months to get the strength back. Every day after birth of complete rest is a tremendous bracha. However, there are challenges of living in the shviger's home or in the mother's home, because then you have the natural jealousies and inconsistencies, and the mother is going to show the daughter-in-law or to show the daughter how you bathe the baby, and don't tell me how to do it, and I show you how to do it, and you do it my way. And this is the nature of the world, and this is typical, and You be humble and you learn how to understand, even though you don't have to always accept, but just, Mavid al Midaisav counts tremendously. And don't think and don't let things linger and frogs building up in your throat. When you need to talk about it, you talk about it. And when women or even men, when we talk about their problem, talking alone and expressing it lowers down the issue. Not when you're emotional and angry and you can even get angrier, but we're talking about expressing the emotion properly and talking about it in the proper time. It helps. That itself helps to resolve it. As we mentioned before, tone of voice is very important, and many Bachrim, we tend to come from the yeshiva world where everything is hot, chop, 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 choppy talk, and hurt, and matter of fact. And when you're talking to a woman, especially your wife, tone of voice is tremendously important. Looking at them and speaking, this takes a long time of practice to getting used to it. You're not talking to someone that you ever spoke to and related to in your life, and now it's your wife, and it's not just for an hour a week, it's 24/7, and you must be much more gentle, understanding, and respectful, and you learn how there's a natural flow, and when it's humble, it's beautiful. And that's why there's a tremendous challenge between shluchim shluchais, when you have to be both business together and home together. And anyone who has to work with their wife in the business world, business is a very rough, tough place, and matter of fact, and get the job done. At home, everything is about humility, and it's a very, very big challenge to be able to cross over that line between house and between the work. If you have that challenge, you have the challenge. If you can't handle it, then reach out for help, but there's definitely not to ignore it. Yes, we're not used to being vulnerable. It seems like in older days, Chassidim had much closer friends, real friends, very honest and truthful emotionally with each other, very, very vulnerable emotionally. Mashpiyim and friends knew a lot about your life. Today we don't have that as much, unfortunately. So to become connected and more relating to a wife, there needs to be vulnerability, and that's where intimacy can grow, and that's a challenge. And again, you have to learn it. And if you don't have it, get a mentor. And here where we see Aseh L'Charav, the proper one, is very important. And we have to accept that we live in a world that's not normal, and many times in the yeshiva world we're not taught what's normal, and therefore we think we're normal, but we possibly are not normal. I don't mean meshuggah crazy, but not normal means not the way we should, not the way that's... If we would bring somebody who we can say that is normal into our home, and after 2 days, how many things will they be able to point out that, hey, this is not right. You're not doing this right. This is not the way things should be done. This is not normal. We learn that, as I said before, from feedback, and Mitzvah Hashem, with the proper respect and the proper patience and positivity, tracht gut wird sein gut, we all can grow. Yes, we can all work things out. Everyone has their baggage and everyone has their package, but with proper understanding and respect, we can always build. When we get to some of the questions, if there are more, keep sending them in. I'll talk about them in the order that they came in. I'm going to talk about them as it is. Okay. The question is as follows. How much physical affectionate touch is appropriate outside the bedroom or within the bedroom during the day when not planning to be intimate? Could there be a difference between couples, ones which are more tactile or less tactile, ones which feel physical touch is a much greater part of the relationship? Is there a clear line that can or should be drawn? What is the practical hashkafic reason for limited affection outside the bedroom? Is there a healthy way for a very touchy couple to create a healthy balance? Okay, the question is understood. Again, is there a objective what's normal and what's not normal? That's a good question. Physical affection is one of the ways that we deepen our relationship. It's healthy when it's not selfish for my pleasure. it's healthy and respectful and respecting boundaries when you're showing love and care to somebody else. A lot of these issues, especially of the bedroom, I gotta say, there are kind of three categories. One is halacha, which is the law in Shulchan Aruch, which should be practiced by all religious people, by all people in general. There is what's called a chumrah, which means a stringency that is brought in halacha, but stringencies are brought in halacha as stringencies, which means there are possible exceptions when needed. Like in the laws of kashrus, you have chumras. What if it's a child? What if it's a hefsid meruba? Etc., etc. So there are chumras in these areas which could be exceptions when you need to. And then there is what's called midas chasidus, or kedusha. The kadesh atzmacha b'mutalach, make yourself holy with what's permissible to you, which according to the Alter Rebbe is a mitzvah aseh mid'oraisa, and one of the mitzvahs which specifically apply to the bedroom. That's why the bedroom is such a holy and can be complicated in this area, because you have so many mitzvahs going on at the same time. I'm going off for a minute. You have the V'ahavta l'orecha kamaycha, which is a mitzvah that's going on in the bedroom. The Gemara mentions it. You have the mitzvah of pru'urvu. You have the mitzvah of aina, she'era k'susava aina salayigra, the time is supposed to be with your wife. And for those who didn't realize, it's not a positive commandment, it's a negative commandment. Aina sa loy yigra, that her time you should not withhold. You should not minimize her time. It's not a mitzvah for you to make time. It's a mitzvah that when she needs that time, you show up and you don't tune out. That's just a by-the-way point. And then there is a mitzvah of kadesh atzmacha b'mutalach, to make yourself holy with what's permissible to you, and that's not a scripted mitzvah, as written by the Rebbe many times, and that's very individual, and you have to figure out what level you're on and what's holy. So there's a lot of things, let's call it holiness. And holiness in the bedroom is a higher level, which you have to figure out, am I at that level or not? Hasidim in general were very much into holiness. In general, it's the man that lays out, or leads the way with the holiness, and the woman follows along, if we're talking about concepts of holiness. But the person needs to be able to examine themselves and say, am I a chassid? The Chabad Chassidus do something for me. I'm talking to the men here. We were 8 years in yeshiva. We learned Tanya. Is this a program that we signed up to? Does it work for us? Do we work this? Does it affect us? Are we Hasidim in any way? Or we just say, well, now I'm married, I have a bedroom, and I just do whatever my animalistic desires are? You have to make a real cheshbon and say, am I a Chassid? I should do some of the Hasidic stuff. It works for me. I'm a Chabadnik. I should live up to it a little bit, but I didn't practice when I was a Bacher, or maybe I did practice and it was in a selfish way. Now you have someone else to deal with, and you have to figure it out. So you can't force Kedusha on someone else or on yourself if you're not there. We're definitely into the world, and much more worldly and much less iskafia as used to be. We should have more iskafia with our speech and thought, but that's where we are. So in the Kedusha in Yanim, that has to really be spoken to and see which level you're holding, and if you have a question, you go to a mashpia. But we tend to mix all these three things in, halacha, chumrah, and kedusha, and we say, well, we don't know what's what. And I have to suggest to the men, I know it's a little boring, the book, but get yourself informed, different things about the bedroom, if this is halacha, if it's a chumrah, or it's kedusha, so you can know how to deal with it. And yes, if it's a halacha, be more demanding of yourself, and it will bring you more shalom bayis. If it's a chumrah, learn if you're an exception or not. And if it's kedusha, maybe you are on the level of the kedusha with your wife, maybe not. You'll figure that one out. There's a book from Israel in Hebrew. I have not seen any of it in English. It's called Sheikadesh Atzmai. It's a long book. It has about 850 pages, but there's a shorter version in the beginning of it, and then a longer version in the second half, where it's 2/3 of the book. I think the author is Rabbi Nachmanson, and it's a great book. I read through it a few times. There's nothing extreme and outlandish and crazy in there. It's very, very normal, what I call normal, and it's good to know the difference of these things. So back to the specific question of the physical affection. So I always point to a beautiful sikha, which is the last printed sikha after the entire volume of Lekutei Sichas Chelik Vav. Chelik Vav Lakota Sichos, it's not this context, but it's about hugs and kisses in a different context, about mezuzahs and sefer Torahs and people. It's page 413 in Lakota Sichos, Chelik Vav. It's 3 pages, and the Rebbe basically explains there are beautiful concepts which you can bring into relationship. But there are 2 types of hugs and kisses, and the Rebbe talks about a kiss specifically. One comes from a deep feeling of love, when a person is very excited and very loving, and they can't even express it in words, because words are limiting, so you bring that love through a kiss. And that comes through a tremendous expression of love to the one who you're loving. And that has certain conditions. Another type of kiss, says the Rebbe, which is just a sign of closeness and endearment. Like the Rebbe says, natural endearment between family members, even brother and sister, which the Gemara says should not happen, but only by Ula, because Ula wasn't afraid that he would have any improper thoughts. But it's a natural, it's not the love, but it's a sign that shows on love. Like when you kiss a mezuzah and you walk through the door, it's not that, oh, I love this mezuzah so much I can't express it in words, now I'm going to give you a kiss or a sefer Torah. But it's respect, it's endearment. So when it comes to relationship, in simple words, we can say that there's 2 types of physical affection. One is love, strong love, pleasure, and most of that, or all of that, depending on your Hasidic level, belongs in the bedroom. Not outside the bedroom. Outside the bedroom, yes, there is closeness, there is chiba, there is endearment, there is sweetness, and there is physical touch as well. Is fine if it's in privacy. You know, when a husband comes home, you know, you're not, most people checking the email, checking the text, checking the mail from the mailbox, the wife is in the kitchen somewhere, you barely say hello. If you're in the beginning of a relationship, you're building the relationship, there's nothing wrong with a physical touch, a small kiss or a quick hug. That's normal. But when it comes to prolonged hugs and kisses or strong ones, or that's already things that is either a deep expression of love or something which is going to be more physical, pleasurable, which is part of foreplay, let's say, which should belong in the bedroom and in times of intimacy. Otherwise, you have to find yourself a line. If it brings the husband to become aroused, that's a shaila of if al pi Chassidus, it's definitely not an issue, not a good thing anymore. And halacha, it's not a problem if it will not bring to zara lavatala. Also, people, need privacy, and it's getting all over your wife in improper time is not necessarily healthy, although you might feel healthy and touchy, etc. And everyone has to figure out their own comfort zone and comfort level. And again, if you ask for feedback, honestly, you will find out. Because the newlywed women don't want to say anything that's going to offend the husband. But if you really show honesty and openness and humility that you really want to know, then they'll tell you the truth, and you'll feel out, and you'll know. You'll know what's proper and what's not proper. Next question: how do we go about chumras that we were taught that are only chumras but are permitted? Understandably, we try to be machmir. What if something needs to be changed, but one of us were taught otherwise? So it's wrong to say it's chumras but are permitted. No, a chumra is not permitted if it's a chumra. It's permitted only in exceptional circumstances. So you have to find that out. As the Rebbe writes about this specifically, chumras, talk to a Rav Meira Hira, Papayel, and figure that out. And yes, husband and wife should be on the same page. Some people were taught by chazan teachers or kala teachers that come from different backgrounds and that teach differently. Some teachers feel that today's day and age, everybody is promiscuous, and therefore you have to teach the minimum. Some people feel the opposite. Today's world is so crazy with so much garbage and pornography all over the place that we have to teach really healthy stuff, and the more chumras you take, the healthier you'll be. Otherwise, you might get into trouble. And therefore, people come with different lessons that they have taught. It's good to compare notes and go back to the teacher or one of the teachers or both or of and talk it through. Now, obviously, many husbands and wives are embarrassed. I don't want to talk to a Rav. It's my private thing. This Rav I don't trust. I do trust. They'll believe it or not. Most Rabbanim have a complete level of confidentiality, and there's plenty of those and if not, find one or look for one or search out for one, and you can figure out what to do about chumras that are different. In general, I tell husbands, and here I'm talking to the husband specifically, when you get married, the nefesh habahamis will get stronger and will get stronger. You start off in a healthy middle, you'll become a little more grub as time goes on. You start off a little too liberal, you might fall off the cliff as time goes on, and that's not healthy. And another line, the Eibishter created man with a brain, and in the crazy world we have, sometimes you'll have fantasies, imaginations, let's call them. Imaginations, what your bedroom will be like. Don't bring your imaginations into reality, because any imagination you'll ever have from a magazine or a movie or a website or a novel, that's not real life. That's completely fake and fabricated. And don't try to bring that into reality. Reality is dvarim shebeinoi lebeino. And a third line I will say in connection to that remember, intimacy is about getting close to the person. Yes, the Eibishter created that it does happen through getting close physically, getting close to the body, and it is expressed through such a medium. But remember, if you find yourself a good line to remain healthy, if I find myself being into the body more than the person, get back on the road. You went off the road. Make sure you're always having the feeling and the emotional bond with the person and not with the physicality of the person, because that reduces and it makes it very shallow, and then there could be resentment, etc. Another question. Why do the halachas of touch between husband and wife not during intimacy? Are you allowed to hug, kiss, massage, lay in bed together, etc.? This is, again, a level of al pi halacha. There is no issue if it doesn't bring too much arousal. Al pi chasidus, you have to be careful. But again, a husband needs to satisfy the wife's need. So for shalom bayis, the answer is yes, you can, as long as there is understanding of what it may lead to, if it needs to lead to that. So some people will say, I'm so chassidish, and I can't do that. Yes, there is a very difficult transition from a Bachar life where all the concepts of women and sexuality is all treif and chazer and unheard of and terrible. And when you get married, all this becomes a mitzvah, so it becomes very difficult to find the transition, and especially relating to another person here. And a good answer I once heard from someone is that you can look at it this way: whatever you are not allowed to do as a single, you're not allowed to do as a married man either. What weren't you allowed to do as a single? Any type of pleasure that's unholy, because it's selfish. You're doing it only to give yourself pleasure, and that's not allowed. And guess what? When you're married, having pleasure is an automatic result of giving the wife pleasure. But that's not, the self-pleasure is also not proper. It should not be for yourself. It's supposed to be for her, and the result is what happens to you by nature. I heard this a shmua. I'm not going to say this authoritatively and exactly with the words, but there were Hasidic young light who, after they got married, real Hasidim, they went to Yechidus to the Rebbe for whatever reason, and they asked the Rebbe what should they do. They're very concerned. Basically, they feel guilty about enjoying life. They said it obviously with the proper respectful words. But what should they do? They're enjoying the physicality of life, and what should they do about it? And the Rebbe answered different people different things. To one person, the Rebbe answered, why are you down on yourself that you're enjoying a mitzvah? So if you're doing a mitzvah and it's enjoyable, that's fine. If you're fressing steak, that's not fine, because that's not a Hasidic thing to do if it's not a mitzvah. But here you're doing a mitzvah, so as long as it's within the parameters of a mitzvah, don't be down on yourself. If you're looking to push yourself, to places where you don't belong, that's another question, and that could be improper. Another question. In our community, they don't teach us practical tips or practical behavior about the bedroom. Intimacy is not pleasurable a few months after marriage. That could be correct. If it wasn't taught, it needed to be taught. And if you don't know, and it's not working, you can reach out. There's plenty of frum professionals, rabbanim, mashpiyim, teachers. You can reach out and sometimes, many times, it's not the problem with the physicality that can also be tweaked so it should be done properly, but many times it's the emotional difficulty. It's the emotional difficulty that people are not ready to be intimate because they're closed and they're tight and emotionally tight, and I'm not ready to be open, so I can't let go. I can't forget about myself. And how can you bond with someone else? And therefore, it's lacking pleasure, so sometimes it has to be addressed not only on a physical level, but also on an emotional, mental level. Shalom Bay's question. My wife fights with her parents. Okay, let's say argues. Argument, allowed. Fighting, no. Generally, that's a line to remember. What's my position when this happens? Never get between your wife and her parents, obviously, and you should be, obviously, standing up and respecting your wife. You don't really know, you haven't lived with her parents, you don't really know what's going on over there, and you have to wait until time is calm and you can examine it if your wife invites you to. Just because we can be humble and ask for feedback and want to know the truth, you can't give feedback to your wife and tell her the truth if she's not ready to hear it, if she doesn't want to hear it. So, got to be careful. Because as men, we can be, real guys. Today we live in a very feminized world, which is a big tzara, and we can't talk as men and be open, and you're wrong, and what are you doing? Everybody gets offended from everybody else, and you offended me, and I won't talk to you for 2 years, or whatever else. But in the men's world, things are supposed to be very simple and honest and open, and it's not a problem. You cannot do that with your wife unless she's really ready and able. You have to be very emotionally sensitive and in tuned. So be careful, but respond very respectfully and try to de-escalate. That you can always do. Try to de-escalate. Please stop. Let's be calm. What can we do to make this better, etc. Next, we dated and can talk for hours, had a lot in common. Now we're married and have a hard time having long conversations. What else is new? Plus now our differences are very strong. How do we live with our differences? I like to spend, she is stingy. I want one kind of shlichus, she wants another kind of shlichus. Our differences are so apparently, what can we do? Yeah, well, one thing is, seemingly, you didn't date seriously. It's a problem today in the dating world. This should be demanded from shadchanim or whoever, to parents, to keep young men and women in the dating process to be dating seriously. There's no chit-chatting. All this should be done in dating. You want one kind of shlichus, another, you spend, she's stingy. This should be dating talk. Very serious, vulnerable levels of discomfort, getting out of each other's comfort zone. That should happen during dating. But once you're married and you had a lot of differences, well, figure out a formula. How are we going to solve our differences? Are we such strong chassidim? We're going to write the Rebbe and we're going to open an Igris, and that's what we're going to all decide. If you're on that level, so be it. You need to talk to a Rav, so be it. You need to talk to a professional, so be it. But start the communication and try to resolve, because just shutting down and giving in and giving in and giving in will ultimately create too much resentment, and it won't work. So if you didn't date seriously, start dating seriously now. After the fact that you're married, you gave your word, so you're stuck with each other, or you're going to love each other now for the rest of your life, and get help. After 3 months, reach out. There are plenty of people that can help you sort each other out. And many, many times, all these differences will be sorted out if everyone will feel that the other spouse understands them perfectly. If your wife feels that you understand her and really get where she's coming from and really feel what she's feeling, she'll compromise. And the same thing the other way. When you will feel understood, that she really gets your issue, then it'll be easier to compromise. How do you know if you're being intimate with loving her body or her? How do you know the difference? How do I know if I'm giving her pleasure or giving me pleasure? Hard to know the difference. That's a great question, and practice makes perfect, but the easier body or her is you just know if you're feeling close to the person. Again, the secret will be if you ask for feedback and she will see that you're honest, and you'll get the feedback. You'll know the difference. because women will pick that up if you're into the body or into the person. Selfish or not selfish, as the Gemara says, put your wife's pleasure in front of your pleasure. That's the beginner's level. She is priority over me. That's the first level. Make her comfortable, make her happy, etc., etc. Okay. Any other questions?
Those are the questions that came in for now. Actually, just one more just came in. Let me just catch that one. If you want to send any questions, it's adai.org/ask-anonymous question. Let's just check out the last one. Yeah, I'll send it to you, Rabbi, and determine if you want to read that one.
Okay, another question. If you want to be the man of the house and take care of the finances and make it your responsibility for the expenses, at the same time, how can you make the wife feel a responsibility as well and not just spend with no thought? Well, I'm not sure what take care of the finances. Technical issues, some women are able to manage all the bills and take care of the bills, and some guys do all the banking and take care of the bills. I'm not sure if that's called responsibility. Responsibility means that we both talk and we understand that the husband's responsibility is to provide, in additional to protect, it says in the Ksub, but to provide, which means I'm going to work hard and try to make a lot more. And your wife's needs should be just important as your needs. Many guys, when they get married, they don't know the wife's needs. Did you know that washing a sheitel can cost $40, $50, $60? And although you might not wash your yarmulke for a whole year, but a woman needs to wash her sheitel every once in a while, you didn't know. So you have to discuss all these things. What's the wife's needs, what's expenses, a lot more things which you never imagined. On the other hand, yes, you can sit down with your wife and take an Excel spreadsheet and put out how much money you make and what things cost, and you'll say, wow, I'm really not making enough. I need to get another job, or ask the Eibishter for more money, or we can figure out how we can save a little bit. As long as there's mutual understanding, and sit down and talk about it, not in a way of I own her and I own this house and everything has to be responsible, etc. But it's a relationship. It's back and forth. It's a natural ratzi v'shuv. It's not a boss. You're not sitting with your CFO or CEO, etc. Think of it that way. As soon as it turns into a business Chabad house budget, you're going down the wrong track. I rely on my wife a lot, and she takes care of a lot of things. I know she doesn't like it that way. How can I start being the man? Well, you can ask, number one, like I said before, call it feedback, call it whatever. Tell her that you want to take on a few responsibilities, which she wants you to do. Remember, naturally, the way the Eibishter made it, women want to be provided for and protected. They want you to be responsible. If a woman feels that the husband is not responsible, like the lioness feels the home is going to be is not safe, then she's going to take over the responsibility to be safe. If a child doesn't feel hugged and protected, the child will begin to nag you, because that's the nature. So if you're the man who's supposed to provide for the house and do everything, and you're not doing what you need to be doing, then naturally the woman will want to make sure the house is going to be protected, and she's going to take over. So don't take over all the responsibilities. Take over one or two, but be very consistent. And there's no excuses. I did this. I had a headache. I had a stomach ache. I didn't feel well. That doesn't work for us guys. It should not be that way. And if it is that way and we're not okay, then we should get help. We live in a world, as I mentioned before, that has a lot of abnormalities. We grew up not in closed-door families anymore. And not all families are always healthy. Not the community is always healthy. And we're allowed to face ourselves at one point in our lives and say, am I healthy? Maybe I'm not healthy. Maybe I have emotional outbursts. Maybe I'm not emotionally intelligent. Maybe I don't even know what it means to feel. All I know is what it means to physically feel. Maybe I don't know what empathy means. And or maybe I know a little bit and I should become better. and reach out for help. Yes, we learn Chassidus Chabad, where it's supposed to be all about birur hamidos, emotional growth, but yet we may not have that, unfortunately. We may be stuck in living in our head, and all about another chakira and another svara. So, and it hurts relationship. When we're not emotionally healthy, it hurts relationship. And God forbid we have borderline stuff or addictions of all sorts, mashke, alcohol, or gambling, or pornography, or whatever else that can happen in our world. We have to make sure we're healthy, because in relationship there got to be zero tolerance for such things, and it doesn't work. It destroys relationships. After full day, hard to carry on conversation. My wife will talk about her whole day, but I don't feel need to relate. What to do? Well, you don't have to talk about your whole day. You just have to sit and listen to your wife talk about her whole day, and that's perfectly fine. And you should get feedback, as I mentioned before, about this from your wife. Am I a good listener? Or you tune out and you fall asleep, or you go onto your phone, etc., etc. And when you'll be a stronger person and more stable and understanding, a woman will be stronger and more motivated to do things. If you're not motivated, it's hard to give over that motivation. So you don't have to carry on. You don't have to make conversation. But let her talk about her whole day and ask her questions about her whole day. Show interest. Get in tuned. You don't have to solve any of it. This is basic knowledge. Women are talking about their problems not to get your solutions, but be heard and be understood. When you ask the right questions, you will show that she's understood. And if you don't feel the need to relate, that's bittul. All the years in yeshiva should have gotten us bittul. The joke goes, getting married is bittul hayesh, having children is bittul b'metzias. Well, if you're resisting that bittul, too bad. You got to start with the bittul. And if you don't feel the need to relate, you respectfully, humbly relate. And that's how you make deeper relationships. Can you say that it's the wife's job to do laundry, clean, cook? Well, in the olden days, yes, the wife's job was to take care of the house. Akeres habayis, which not only spiritually but physically, the kitchen, the cleanliness, and the laundry. What about the shopping? If your wife she's doing other things that old-time women didn't do, which is get out of the house and go to the market, or do more than just go to the market, then we crisscross roles. Maybe you need to do more of that at home. If your wife is weak, or she's postpartum, or whatever, or she can't handle it, or she's working a part-time job because the Abisha you didn't make the keli and you didn't find a way to make enough money, and your wife has to work, or teaching a half a day, or teaching a whole day. If your wife teaches a whole day in Beis Rivka or wherever, then it's not so simple to say teach all day plus do laundry plus clean plus cook. So that you got to go to. Many Rabbanim and Mashpim have different views about this, and this is a subject that you talk about when you date seriously. This is on the table. What do you imagine? What did you see at home? What do you expect of yourself? What do you think about this? So you have expectations. When you lower your expectations, you won't have disappointments. And if you think there's a terrible resistance, or she thinks you're lazy, or she just can't handle the cleaning, the cooking, and the laundry, then after a few months you reach out to someone that you can both sit down. You know, Rabbanim used to deal a lot with shalom bayis. Just because people are not trusting anymore, it's not a good thing. You need to find the person you trust, and you go speak to them, and that's how you correct things if you cannot speak to yourselves and communicate properly.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. This has been great. This is over an hour. Several more questions came in, and perhaps we'll save that for another call or articles or something. So these are great questions. Several questions came in as far as where you can find the professional in the different areas, and one of the referral agencies is relief.net. And you can find them online. They're mostly based in New York, but they do have resources outside of New York as well. That's relief.net. You can find their phone number online. I'll put it on the website as well. If anyone has any other questions that you want to share get answers. Obviously, if you send them to us anonymously, we can't answer you. They're great questions, and we'll try to put them into some future articles or conference calls. But if you have a specific question that you would like to get answered, you can send it to us at info@adai.org, ADAIAD.org. Everything is kept confidential. Or if you want to send it to the form, the anonymous form, and just put, you can make up your own Gmail account or however you want to get the answers from that. So thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Rabbi Lipskier, for sharing with us. This is really important information. Interesting to hear it from, as a woman, to hear a man's perspective. So this is great. And this will be recorded, actually has been recorded, and will be on our website at adai.org/past-events. This event, and as well as the other events in the past and those coming up. This has been our second event of the Shalom Bayis Week. We have another one on Wednesday with Dr. Elka Pinson talking about Shalom Bayis and children and the effects that it has on children, both positively and negatively. And on Thursday, Rabbi Shay's Tab will be talking about how you can improve your Shalom Bayis, even if without the help of your spouse to begin with. So those are important topics for the rest of this week of Shalom Bayis Week. And thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Rabbi Lipskier.
Thank you very much, and Hatzlacha Rabbah. And everyone should have a tremendous bracha and a great Shalom Bayis. We should have the ultimate Shalom Bayis with the coming of Mashiach now. Amen.